All right, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started on our practical wisdom from Proverbs class. We're in the last month, so the last 4 or 5 classes of the quarter. We are in the topical section of Proverbs, and we're going to deal with everybody's favorite today. We're going to deal with a broader subject within the book of Proverbs. Go ahead and turn in your Bibles to Proverbs chapter 23. We'll go there in just a moment. This is going to intersect into a lot of the other areas that we have looked at. Some already we've looked at, and some we're going to look at in the weeks that follow. It is a principle that Solomon is going to touch on. And I think about, with regard to the subject of self-control, that there is this illusion that we have of how much control that we have in this world. When I lived in Colorado, and it was political season, I'm not being political, I'm just saying the situation was no matter which way you were voting, if you were voting one way, you really couldn't lose because that's where the direction was. And if you were voting the other way, you couldn't win. And so you felt like it doesn't really matter. And so, that started my drive toward being a lot less politically active. I felt like I really didn't have any control over that. And the same is true in Kentucky. It seems to be that it's one-sided, right? And so how much of life mirrors that? When you think about how much you can control economically in our society, how much can you control in the culture? You can, but it's a challenge so often. And I think this breeds sometimes, maybe it's not connected, this idea that I just can't help myself. I had no control. And so we kind of use that as a crutch or an excuse. Well, Solomon says that there's a balance in between that, and that is that while there are a lot of things outside of our direct control, there are things that we can control, and there are things, especially within ourselves, that we must control. And self-control is going to show up across the board. So I had there Proverbs chapter 23. What I want you to do is, your teacher is here. He's walking down the hallway. All right, there you go. Proverbs chapter 23, I'd like you to go ahead and just kind of look at Proverbs 23. Yeah. And I want you to scan it for a couple of minutes. And I want you to scan it for this purpose. I want you to tell me, as you walk through it, what matters, what subjects does Solomon talk about with regard to their connection to self-control? In other words, what are areas we struggle with to control ourselves that he talks about in Proverbs chapter 23? And I think that's what he's doing. As you walk through Proverbs 23, he talks about the consequences of people who don't exercise self-control. So what are they? So just walk through. You don't have to start at the beginning of the chapter. I think it doesn't matter where you look. You're going to find some subjects where self-control is crucial. As soon as you find one, just blurt it out. Alcohol. Okay, alcohol. More than just this, but that's how it kind of puts an exclamation point on this, right? Who has woes? Who has sorrows? And you kind of see this guy who gives in to his passion, his desire for alcohol. He suffers consequences as a result of that. And when he's waking up with his hangover, what does he say? I want it again. I'm going to do it again. I've been hurt, bruised, maybe gotten into fights. It's cost me in all these different ways. And yet my passion, my desire for it is so great. I've lost all self-restraint to such a degree that I'm going right back after it. So let me ask you a question. Humanity and alcohol, is it a self-control? Is there a self-control issue there? Undoubtedly. Undoubtedly. All right, what else? Okay, money in 4 through 5. How is it expressed as a self-control issue?
I think it's putting an emphasis on it being a primary pursuit in life rather than God being your primary pursuit, money being.
Yeah, so if you want to put out there to the side of that, and we may have gotten to that when we talked about it, in 1 Timothy 6, 9, and 10, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It pierces you through with many sorrows. there's an extent to which you can pursue in excess material things. It becomes God, Matthew 6 and verse 24, and you lose the restraint, the discipline that you need to have. And of course, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago with regard to money. Stewardship is a self-control issue, right? Controlling our spending, controlling debt. All of those require self-control. What else in the chapter? Anything before we got the money? Gluttony. Okay. All right. I know that there's more going on in verse 2. I think also verse 20 and 21. But appetites. I would even broaden it there. Whatever those appetites are physically and fleshly. And he'll deal with that some in Proverbs chapter 23. But the appeal of our flesh can be strong and it can get us into a lot of trouble. And there are consequences that come when we don't exercise self-control. There are any others? Anything else you see? You see a self-control issue in verse 13 and 14? If so, how would you identify it?
Discipline.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. All right, so
We can go both extremes, lack of or too hard.
okay. What does Solomon deal with here in 13 and 14? Withholding. All right. Why is that a self-control issue? By the way, we're going to have an entire week on parenting because that's parenting and marriage. That's two of the favorite things that preachers and teachers like to talk about because preachers do it perfectly, right? Yeah. Why does it require discipline to discipline your children?
You have to be consistent.
Okay, consistency is huge. And I think I've told you before that I wasn't raised in the same kind of household that my wife was. And her parents, very wisely, and we tried to follow this principle, was that if it's wrong today, it's wrong tomorrow. And if you get in trouble for it now, you're going to get in trouble for it next time. Because if there's an inconsistency there, that you're just punishing them because maybe you're having a bad day and you're lashing out because it's getting on your nerves today, but it's not the case on another day, and you let it go and you let it slide, what is the child learning about that behavior? Yeah, I can get away with it if I can just choose my moments. If mom and dad are in a good mood, then I may be okay, right? But that consistency and discipline, doesn't that require discipline for you as a parent? Don't you get weary and tired if your parents here today of disciplining your children for the same thing 1,000 times? It's hard.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yours are perfect. I know. I mean, so for those of you who don't have that situation. All right, so.
Yes, we're tired.
Yeah, yes. You didn't get sleep last night, right? All right, so it takes discipline. It takes discipline in the small things, right? We might say, I'm going to be disciplinarian when it's huge. And when they're small, a lot of it's small things. But if we'll fight those battles when they're small, we don't have to fight those battles when they're older. But that requires discipline. And children crave discipline. They need boundaries. They want to know. And so we've got to exert the energy and the effort and the consistency to make that happen. Anything else you see in chapter 23? How about in verses 15 through 18? If you were to call that a discipline matter, what would it be? What's he dealing with in 15 through 18?
Matters of the heart.
Matters of the heart. Okay. So how might discipline be important in the matters of the heart in verses 15 through 18?
Seeking what is good.
How you present yourselves. Okay. All right. And how does self-control play a part there?
I see that as like jealousy and comparison.
Okay. All right. So let me just put disciplining thoughts. Because, and we'll get there, that is something that Proverbs is going to be big about. Can't you feed thoughts of envy and jealousy and comparison? Don't we live in a society that encourages that? When you think about social media, that when people are curating their lives and giving you the best of, the greatest hits of their lives, and you look at that and you maybe are struggling in one of those areas and you see that and you go, I can't measure up. I wish I had what they had. And you begin, and you can feed it. And you have to discipline yourself to look at the circumstances that you have and not be so concerned with somebody else. All right, one other that I wanted to talk about is 27 and 28. Verses 27 and 28. Is there a discipline-related matter in 27 and 28? Or not? Seems like maybe there is. What would it be? Okay. Lust. All right. Which, to ask the question is to give the answer. Is that a self-control area? Do we have to discipline our thoughts? Our main text, we're going to get there in a few minutes. I wanted to do one other exercise before we get into the text. Self-control is a whole body issue. And we're going to look at a text that kind of highlights that, okay? But what I want you to do right now, and if you're a married couple, we need to make a deal before this. I'd like you, if you have a writing implement and paper, to do this exercise. But if your spouse is next to you, I want your word that you're not going to look at their list, okay? Okay, with that understanding, maybe you're going to do it mentally if you don't have pen and paper. If you have pen and paper, I would like you to participate. I'd like you to write down an area or areas in which you frankly feel like you have a struggle with self-control. So it's a two-part exercise. I'd like you to do that. You go ahead and begin working on that. An area in which you are working, are striving to improve with regard to a self-control matter. Write that down. Spouses, it does not matter. We all have them. Maybe you think you know what they are. Maybe you would like him or her to put these things on their list. That's not what this exercise is about. I want you to focus on an area, at least one, in which you're struggling with self-control. Here's the second part of the assignment. So go ahead and do that part. The second part is, I want you to look at an area in which you have made strides, have made some measurable improvement with regard to self-control. I don't want to know out loud what that issue is. But I'd like you to share with the class some principles that you have learned that have helped you. Some maybe tools that you have employed that have caused you to make progress with regard to an area that you had struggled with. So however broad or specific you can make that. All right, so area in which you're struggling. Part two, a strategy that you have employed that has helped you to make progress. Okay? Give you a minute or two, and then I don't want to hear the first list. That list, you can burn it after class, whatever you want to do with that. Or I want you to think about it. It can become an area of objective, a personal growth area. But what I would like you to do, because there are probably a lot of folks who can benefit from some of the strategies that you are developing to help you with it, where you have seen progress. All right? I want you to spend more time on the strategies part, so if that makes you feel better. Okay, I'd love to give you more, and I just want to kind of have the top flight of the principles. So let's go ahead. If you've got some principles that helps you in some area in which you're struggling with self-control, and you're willing to share that with the class, somebody get the ball rolling. Grant?
Stay busy.
Okay, stay busy. All right, and a lot of these are going to go across the board to a lot of different areas, right? That's distracting yourself and whatever it is maybe that you struggle with the self-control matter, to busy your hands and to maybe get into an environment where you're more kinetic, you're physical. All right, what else?
Confess it.
Okay, good. So that brings up matters of like accountability, or having someone who can hold you accountable, and that's vital. By the way, for married folks in here, we recommend it all the time, but it's a principle that he repeats over and over again. There's a book called Marriage by Paul David Tripp, and confessing in our marriages, probably one of the hardest things to do, one of the best things that you'll ever do for your life overall. But perhaps there's also somebody outside of the marriage that you confess whatever that is that you deal with. Somebody that then can hold your feet to the fire. All right, what else?
Stopping and praying before your next move.
Sounded really good, but I didn't hear it. Say it again.
Stopping and praying before your next move.
Okay, all right. Okay? A deliberation, a reflection that keeps you from acting in haste. I mean, and again, I want you to think about how this crosses a lot of different lines into whatever we're talking about. You know, you may be thinking, depending on what's on your other side of the sheet there, you may be thinking about all of this in relation to whatever the thing is that you're struggling with. And if so, good. Because I think these strategies will help in a lot more ways than one. All right, what else? Stay busy, confess it, stop and pray before you act.
Try and look at the high level view.
Okay, so explain what you mean by that.
So obviously in context of certain things that are going on too. For instance, who are you trying to serve by doing a certain action? What are the means of that and the end of that?
Is this what you're saying? See the bigger picture? Okay, all right. All right, so what does this fit with the goals I have for my life in whatever the area is? Will this accomplish what I'm looking to do? All right, what else? Let me give you one of mine so that you don't feel like you're just all giving it and not taking. Create new practices. Right? You'll never break out of the ruts of areas where you struggle if you keep yourself in the same circumstances and you keep repeating the same patterns and habits. A part of progress with regard to self-control issues means that I have got to break the old mold and I've got to create a new one. All right? What else? Anything else?
Being mindful and actively choosing where I'm going to spend my energy.
Okay. So deliberate. And that can be both a noun and a verb, right? I'm going to deliberate. I'm going to think about this. I'm going to be mindful. I'm not going to be reactionary. So I haven't done any kind of specific kind of a habit. Let's say that you have a temper problem. Would that help? I mean, really, just let's take that, right? Let's just take temper. That's a safe one. It's a bad one, but it's a safe one. Will that help? Yeah, I think so. Depending on the circumstances, temper, confessing it, absolutely. Stopping and praying before acting. See the bigger picture. Does this fit with the goals of who I'm trying to be as a follower of Christ? Create new practices. Sometimes in close relationships, people know our buttons, don't we? We know which button to push, right? If we're in conflict and we want to win, if that's our strategy. And so what if in that conflict you have been mindful and deliberate about what you're going to do and you don't take the bait and you de-escalate? Or you choose to a loving response, even when you're goaded. It can make all the difference. All right, any other strategies before we? By the way, you're going to see a lot of this in Proverbs. A lot of the wisdom that we live with, and a lot of us developing the kind of strategies that God wants us to have, are built upon the foundation of the wisdom of God, right? And we're going to see that, I think, play out in just a moment. Let me go ahead and go to the book of Nehemiah. Somebody tell me what the book of Nehemiah is about. You didn't think I was doing that in Proverbs, did you? Huh? Rebuilding what? Okay, that's going to be involved in that. There's a bigger rebuilding project that relates to the temple and other things in Jerusalem. What does the city of Jerusalem also need? Walls. What's happened to the walls in Nehemiah's day? It's about rebuilding walls. What do you think? They've been torn down. The gates have been burned with fire. All right? So some of the brethren of Nehemiah come from Judah, and they come down, their homeland, and they come down and they report to him how all the walls have been torn down, and how the gates are burned with fire. Does anybody remember Nehemiah's response to that? So Nehemiah is a Jew. He is serving in an administrative position in the Medo-Persian Empire, the invaders' empire. That empire has allowed some of the Jews to go back. And the Jews are there trying to put their lives back together. They're trying to rebuild their houses. They're trying to rebuild the temple. They're trying to be involved in all of these projects. And things are so terrible. They come back and they give a report to Nehemiah. Nehemiah hears that, and as a good Jew, what might you think, even if you haven't read Nehemiah chapter 1, would be his response?
Pleased to go.
Okay, ultimately he says, I want to go help, right? There's an emotional response.
He's very upset.
Yeah, he weeps, he prays, he fasts. He's got a decision to make, to go to the king and say, this is what's going on. He's afraid of how that might go. It might not go well with one of these arbitrary, tyrannical rulers. You never know what you're going to face. And yet, the king's never seen him this way before, and that works to his favor. And he says, I want to go back and I want to help. What's the big deal? It's kind of hard for us. I mean, can you imagine, first of all, a wall around the city of Bowling Green? It would be very odd. I don't know. Maybe there are some in other parts of the world that's just not coming to my mind. Even in places where there are walls, they function differently. Like the old city of Jerusalem has a wall around it. That's been built in modern times. Of course, the ancient city did, but that's really more to reinforce the tourism. It's not a safety feature as much. In ancient times, the walls made all the difference. It was security. It was safety. It was to preserve the community inside. And you probably, if you do wonder why I'm talking about this, go to Proverbs chapter 25 and verse 28. It makes this make more sense. Proverbs 25 and 28. Somebody read that for us when you get there.
Like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control.
All right. So if we can envision how devastating it was for Nehemiah and the Jews to be in a city where there are no walls to protect them, and the enemy could just walk right in, and they didn't have all the modern weapons that we have, but you at least had, and when you think about the walls, these walls are not sheetrock. They're not even exterior, veneer brick. They're 15 to 20 feet thick. So if you can imagine the width of this room being the wall and how that would be a protection, it would be a help. And sometimes, like Jericho, they had two walls. And so if you get in the outer wall, you still had an inner wall. They're trying to keep problems at bay, and so they had to have walls around it. And so the writer of Proverbs comes along and he says that like a city without walls, so is a man who has no self-control. He is painting a picture of how fundamental it is for us to have walls around our appetites, our emotions, our drives, so that self-control will benefit our relationships, our workplace, our parenting. Everything that we talked about in Proverbs chapter 23 requires you to either build some walls, to keep them there, or to rebuild them if necessary. I don't know if you have ever known somebody who seems to have a hard time resisting temptation, who seem to have no walls whatsoever? If they were thinking it, they said it. If they felt it, if they had an impulse, it was almost like a toddler. They did it, right? Have you ever looked into the life of somebody like that? Would you grade them a success in any way? And I think we're in a society that creates that more and more. We need those walls to keep us from the temptations that we face in the various areas that you mentioned, from the appetites that we feel, against guilt and regret. I don't know if you've ever seen of these high-profile cases where they're political figures or they're prominent people in society, even religious figures. And you ever seen them do the perp walk? And it's really, especially in 2025, what do people do when they're in handcuffs and they're getting out of the police car and they're either going into the courthouse or they're going into to the jail? What do they always do? They always hide their face. It's like, look, all we got to do is go to Google and find out, we hear your name. We can find out who you are, and we can see everything we want to see. So they probably know that on some level. So why do they do it? What causes them to hide their face as they're walking through those crowd of people all right around them? Shame. Now, I could mention some names right now. If I mention Harvey Weinstein or Bill Cosby or Elizabeth Holmes, back in the day, Martha Stewart, some folks who were high profile. I want to mention some religious figures, but I don't know who you remember. If anybody knows who Jim Baker is, or Ted Haggard, or some of those guys. So prominent, high profile religious figures, all the same. And if you wanted to YouTube any of that, you would see the same kind of response. Self-control is vital, and it is a whole body experience. We don't have the time to look at this, but in Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 4, if you want to note these passages, Solomon is just dealing with all the areas where we might struggle with self-control. Chapter 10 and verse 4, poor is he who works with a negligent hand, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. I need self-control when working on the job. I can squander away the resource of time and the opportunities and the talent God has given me in that. I can be negligent or I can work hard. We're always striving to grow our self-control in that arena. All right, go down to chapter 10 and verse 19. When there are many words, transgression is unavoidable, but he who restrains his lips is wise. Do we need self-control with the tongue? Read James chapter 3. Chapter 11 and verse 12. Chapter 11 and verse 12. Whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding remains silent. We need self-control in how we talk to people. Self-restraint when you're irritated. Now, I don't know, I can't call to mind as I look at you all the work that you do, but I can't imagine that there's an occupation here where you don't have to practice this principle. You can't say everything you feel when somebody is provoking you. You feel irritated, and self-control makes the difference. Now, there are some people. My first job I worked was at the Hinesville Builder Supply, Hinesville, Georgia. I was a yard dog, and so I put together harness orders and construction, brick, sheetrock, or I had to go make deliveries. And I had two bosses, Dwayne Corsi, who was like the polished business type, and he had worked his way up through that little builder supply. And he was the boss. He reported to the owner. And he was smooth. When some guy would come in and the order was wrong, and he would just start cussing him out, and Dwayne would lean back in the chair and he'd listen to him, and then he would respond. Byron Ray was in charge of us yard dogs, right? So he had all those, the grunts back in the back. And he used no restraint whatsoever. The littlest thing would provoke him. And you had no idea if it was what you said or how you said it that would get you on his bad side. And this, even though he was a good religious man, at least for him to tell you, boy, he taught me some words I didn't even know before that, right? And it would just come out in strings. Dwayne kept moving up in the company. Byron was probably 25 years older and was stuck in that position. Let's take out the right or wrong of it for a moment. Look at how it impacts you when you can't control yourself in interaction responses. I'm sure it didn't happen in Bowling Green, does it, Grant? But do you ever see road rage?
Oh, not at all.
Not at all. It never happens, does it? And what is that? Is that not a failure to control your response to the, depending on how you look at it, the dumb things that other people do, right? Proverbs is going to help us in every area where we might struggle. Chapter 15, verse 1 and 2. This one kind of is easy to see. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise makes knowledge acceptable, but the mouth of fools spout folly. Man, how we do react either escalates or de-escalates. The power we have in the words that we use. Chapter 17 and verse 14. The beginning of strife is like the letting out of water. So abandon the quarrel before it breaks out. Self-control in escalating conflict. I think road rage would fit right there too. Proverbs 25, verse 6 and 7. Do not exalt yourself in the king's presence, and do not claim a place among his great men. It is better for him to say to you, come up here, than for him to humiliate you before his nobles, what you have seen with your eyes. Now, Jesus is going to use this imagery in a parable about taking the lowest seat and being humble. How does it take self-control not to be a self-promoter? You do something good, and let's take the work environment for a moment. You have, or in the home environment, you do something that's praiseworthy, you do something that's right, you do something sacrificial. What is our impulse? Don't we want some? Hasn't social media bred this? What do we even have a term for it, don't we? The humble, anybody know? The humble brag, right? And the more crafty you can put that there is I'm sure worn out from the day that I spent volunteering down at the whatever. But what am I doing? I spent my day today serving this one. What did you do? You know, maybe that's how they might want that to be said. Who knows? I don't know hearts, don't know motives. But could it ever be that that's the case? You do something good at work, don't you want the credit for it? If you did it, especially perhaps if somebody else didn't do it and you came along and you picked up their slack. In the home, guys, if you decided to go and empty out all the trash cans and to maybe clean the toilets. If you decided that you would do that, some guys are going, that is what I do. I don't know. But can you just let it go? Or do you need some way to go, hey, when you look in that ceramic bowl, see if you can see your face in it. I'm not telling you what I did. I just want you to. Self-promotion is just built in. We want the accolades, the praise, the acknowledgments of others, right? It's a self-control issue to do what's right for right reasons and let God be the one. Matthew 6 says a lot about that, right, in verses 1 through 18. Chapter 26 and verse 20. Without wood, a fire goes out. Without a gossip, a quarrel dies down. All right, so yes, it takes self-control not to gossip. There's a lot of reasons why we might want to do that. We want to feel like we're in the know. We want to show people that, that we are involved in a certain situation, that it might do something for us positively. You know what's even, I think, harder than that in this realm, that requires more self-control, is to reject gossip. Do you think that's right? Do you think it's harder to shut off gossip? If so, why?
Because it's so juicy.
Well, first of all, I want to know that. Man, I have a sermon that I preach before I go, and if you don't have anything nice to say, come sit next to me, right? Because, boy, I want to know, right? And there's that curiosity. We like to dig it. Maybe it makes us feel better. It's the same reason why people watch reality shows. Is make me feel better about my life. If you can tell me some juicy tidbit. But you ever tried I know, I'm talking to a group full of people who have repelled gossipers. What reaction do you get if you shut down gossip? from the gossiper?
I think sometimes people think you're better than them.
Yeah, the self-righteousness thing, right? I'm trying to think of the word, if there's a better word than prude or goody two-shoes. I don't know what it is, but like a holier than that, right? Now there are some good subtle ways to do that. You know, one of the best ways I've found to do that? Say something good about the person that's being run down. They sure are kind, aren't they? Or I saw them do X, Y, or Z the other day, and it really challenged me to do better. Now you haven't necessarily done the outright self-righteous appearing thing, and you're not even confronting them. Now there's maybe a place for us to go, I don't think we should do that. Now you're really going to run the risk of that. Do you see how self-control bleeds across everything? It really makes it a challenge, and it really makes for a great opportunity for growth. So I don't know what you have on your lists that you built, but Solomon's going to give us some strategies. Let's go in the time that we have to Proverbs chapter 4, verse 20 through 27. And all I want to do in the minutes that remain is to see what part of us is necessary for this self-control battle that we're all in. All right, so notice carefully as we go through it. Proverbs 4, 20 through 27. My son, pay attention to what I say. Turn your ear to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them and health to one's whole body. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything that you do flows from it. Keep your mouth free of perversity. Keep corrupt talk far from your lips. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. Do not turn to the right or to the left. Keep your foot from evil. Now, I dip back into the textual part in the first 9 chapters because it seems to me that Solomon is addressing our subject head on, and he does it in a masterful way. Can you see the self-control issue being addressed here? I think you would see it with words like pay attention, do not, keep, let, give, all these commands. So here's the question. It seems to me that, according to Solomon, this self-control thing is a whole body experience. So help me to see. What are they? What parts does he focus on in the self-control battle?
Ears.
All right, starts with the ears. All right. All right, the eyes. All right, I'm going to say the heart. I'm not looking down here, the seat of our thinking. Would be the innermost being, right? And that blood pumping organ is not really helping us with that part of what he's talking about here. All right, what else? Your mouth. All right, and your feet. All right, all of these are involved in, thank you for the artistry there. That's as good as I get right there. Yes, it is. How do your ears play a part, according to Solomon, in the self-control battle? What does he say about the ears?
Incline your ears to my sayings.
Okay. All right, so there's a positive aspect to self-control. What are you listening to? Are you listening to those sages, counselors, influencers, mentors, whatever it is, that are going to... Now, you think about that. We all know people who are exerting self-control. Now, you look at your little list that your spouse is not looking at, nobody else sees but you, and think if there's somebody that you can turn to who can help you to improve in that area. I think it's a huge strategy. Now, of course, what do we listen to most of all? Solomon, he says, turn your ear to my words. What words is Solomon giving him? Scripture, inspired words, words of God. And so I'm going to filter everything through God's word. Maybe some people that seem like that they are excelling in an area where I want to improve. Does it match up with Scripture? So I'm going to have to be listening to the word in order to see that. By the way, Solomon says a lot about the ears in the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 2 and verse 2. Make your ears attentive to wisdom. Chapter 5 and verse 1. Incline your ear to my understanding. Later on in chapter 18 and verse 15. The ear of the wise seeks knowledge. As we go down the road of life. We are listening to some message all the time, and Jesus says, take care how you listen. Luke chapter 8 and verse 18. And of course, it takes self-control to not listen to certain things, be it gossip, Proverbs 20 verse 19, or foolish counsel, Proverbs 14 and verse 8. What about our eyes? Now, just to note it, look at the paragraph again. Look at all the sight words. Verse 21, sight. Verse 23 and verse 26, watch. Verse 25, eyes. Verse 25, look. Verse 25, gaze. There's a sense in which we can say what we're looking at is as huge as anything in this battle for self-control. Now, we can take the time to look at this idea of what he's saying to look at. You're to watch over, depending on your version. Keep your heart, in verse 23. Look ahead, look to the future, verse 25. Look down, don't be so focused on the big picture that you're missing the details of life. When I talk about the eyes and self-control, where does your mind go? In 2025 America. Lust. And we do realize that is a huge self-control battle that so many are losing. Job is defending his innocence. In Job 31 verse 1, he said, I have made a covenant with my eyes not to behold a virgin. Jesus says, whoever looks upon a woman to lust after her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. So you have this idea of being careful about what it is that you look at. And I think we can fixate on this eye problem as being only a sexual issue. But think about 1 John 2:15-17. It is one of three broad areas of temptation that the devil is using. And he's smart enough to know that there are more ways to get to our heart through our eyes than through pornography and lust. How else? Yes, sir.
Well, just the honest thing, I don't think we could argue this, but now more than ever, there's just so much, we're just become such a visual culture. You've got, this computer, TV, with you all the time, and all the TV shows and streaming services. I think that's probably the one that has increased the most as far as I think people that they struggle with, because it's just all around you all the time with all the screens that you have.
Well, and maybe in another class we'll talk about this and how to get some of that back. But we are that way. We know that we are. We've talked about this before. We love, I don't need PowerPoint to preach. But I'm wondering if people need PowerPoint to listen to the preaching, right? So don't say you're not visual, because you like to have little pictures that break it up, right? So you can look up there for a little while. But just think about how much of what we're looking at. I think a lot of shopping addiction is a matter of what's coming, the lust of the eye. It can also be some of the other, it could be pride of life, it could be lust of the flesh, but I see my parents had it, I see that my friends have it, and I've got to have it. We had a guy show up here this week and wants to put a pod in our parking lot, just so he can service this neighborhood. I'm not judging this neighborhood. It's like any other one. We'd be a perfect place for them to drop a pod so they can bring all the stuff to go to make all the Amazon deliveries day after day after day after day after day. Could that ever be? That's all I'm asking. A lust of the eye. We've got to watch our eyes as it relates to self-control. All right, and then there's the hearts. I think that makes sense. Solomon mentions the heart in verse 21 and 23. That's the inner self. He says, put the right things in your heart and keep the wrong things out of your heart. Jesus says that's the whole crux of the matter. Mark 7:20-23. And then self-control with your mouth. We've already talked about that. And then feet. When he says the feet, he's just talking about where we're going in life. So as you think about your principles and your strategies, in the areas where we struggle, engage your whole body. Solomon says, focus in all these areas. Be careful what you listen to, what you allow yourself to take in and believe and to pursue. Watch the heart. That's where it all begins. Watch your mouth, because it's going to come out there. Self-control issues abound. And watch the general manner of your life. I don't think we have any short supply of strategies that will help us from Proverbs chapter 4, 27. Any thoughts or comments? As Neil observes that we're done before the bell. Thank you very much for your attention.